My name's Gina D. Tate, and I'm the Children's Librarian at the West Carrollton branch of the Dayton Metro Library. And today I'm going to read a book that includes a recipe of one of my favorite foods. We're going to read Rainbow Stew by Katherine Falwell. Rainbow Stew. Look at the rainy day. Stretch, wiggle, sniff and giggle. We scramble from our beds. Grandpa's making pancakes for his favorite sleepyheads. Do you like pancakes? We love to visit Grandpa. It's always so much fun. He lets us play outside all day so we can jump and run. Whimper, sigh, cloudy sky. Is it too wet to play? We don't want to stay inside because of rain today. Grandpa smiles and says to us, I know what we can do. Let's go and find some colors for my famous rainbow stew. Splish, splash, puddle, dash. We bounce right out the door. We're off to find some red and green, some yellow, orange, and more. Grandpa shows us how to move between each garden row. Lifting up the drippy leaves, we see what colors grow. Drip, drop, shake and hop. Here are lots of greens. Spinach, kale, and cucumbers, zucchini, peas, and beans. What's your favorite green food? We find some yellow peppers and a purple cabbage head. We tug on rosy radishes and pop them from their bed. Slip, slide, squishy stride. We snip off red tomatoes. We dig into the dark, wet dirt and pull out brown potatoes. We jump around like grasshoppers and buzz around like bees. We creep along like ladybugs and all get muddy knees. Pull, pick, gather, quick. We need more for the stew. Grab some orange carrots and a purple eggplant too. Our basket's full of colors. We park it by the door. Our clothes and boots are dripping, making puddles on the floor. Grandpa helps us wash our hands and dries our soggy hair. It's almost time to cook, he says, so find some dry clothes to wear. Peel, slice, chop and dice. Colors fill the pot. Stir in herbs and water and then wait till it gets hot. Grandpa says he's proud of us. We're such terrific cooks. While the stew is heating, we have time to read our books. There's the stew cooking. And you're reading. Howl, yowl, tummies growl. We're a hungry bunch. It's time to serve up heaping bowls of rainbow stew for lunch. Yum, 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 yum. And there's a rainbow outside. Goes with the rainbow stew. Boy, that book sure made me hungry. Let's see what my friend Emily Callan at the Dayton Children's Hospital is cooking up for us to eat.
We're back from the garden. We're ready to make some vegetable stew. Again, from the book Rainbow Stew. So, how do we get started? Well, let's remind ourselves what vegetables we picked from the garden. So, in the book, it differentiates between sturdy vegetables and like soft vegetables. So, for our sturdy vegetables, we have bell pepper, carrot and green bean. And for our softer vegetables, we have zucchini and kale. So that's what we're going to use. It also recommends a couple different seasonings to try. And so the ones that I picked for today are thyme and rosemary. So that's what we're going to add in. Now you can do just a basic vegetable stew if you wanted to. But I wanted to add a little protein to this stew, so we're gonna boil a cup of lentils and add that in as well, so that we have a nice, well-rounded meal. So first, let's talk about chopping these vegetables. So let's say you're with your parents, or parents, you're with your kids, and you wanna do some cooking. So I always encourage kids to get their hands on the food and do some of the chopping and cleaning and preparing the vegetables as well. So if you have little guys at home, one great job for them is to pick apart the green beans, right? So when you pick a green bean fresh from the vine, it's gonna have a little stem right there. You can pull that off, put that in the garbage. We'll save that for the garbage later. And then I cut mine in half. So this is like perfect for little guys to do, because they can just do it with their hands. Same with kale. So this kale's a little wilted. I'm gonna be honest with you, I did not go right from the garden into my kitchen. It's been a little bit of time, but the kale's a little wilted, still totally fine. We can pull it off the stem just like this. All right, the stem is totally edible. You could chop this up and put it in your stew if you wanted to, or you could leave it out and just pull apart the kale, and then it's ready to go for your stew. So this, again, perfect job for little guys. Now, another thing to try at home are these safety knives. So I got a set of 3 safety knives that look exactly like this off Amazon for like $6. So very affordable. And it's a great way for young people to learn how to cut vegetables without the risk of actually cutting themselves. So I really encourage something like this, because parents and guardians and adults, right? The sooner that the kids start learning to cook for themselves, the sooner they start making you dinner. Okay? But you know, have the kids join along and chop up the vegetables along with you. And once all your veggies are set, you're ready to get cooking. All right, so now it's time to get cooking. So I'm gonna turn on my pot to a medium-high heat, and I'm gonna let that warm up. And at the same time, I also wanna get my lentils going. Now, you can cook the lentils in the stew if you want, once all the broth is added. Sometimes lentils can get mushy if you overcook them. So I'm gonna cook them in a separate pot, just because it'll be a little bit easier to control that temperature. So I really recommend cooking your lentils in a broth. It's gonna add a lot more flavor. So if you're vegetarian, you can do a veggie broth. If you're not vegetarian, you can do chicken broth, and that's what I'm using today. So by movie magic, this water is already boiling. So the lentils are already ready to add. So I have 1 cup of lentils right here into 2 cups of broth, and that's the ratio that you'll use, 2 to 1. We'll add them in here, give them a little stir. I'm gonna let that come back up to a boil, and then once it's boiling, I'm going to bring it down to a simmer, put the lid on, and then we'll let them cook for about 20 minutes. Now, our pot is nice and hot here. You can tell I just hovered my hand a couple inches over to tell. We're gonna use 1 tablespoon of oil here. So little hands, I recommend measuring. I've had lots of practice, so I know I can control the oil. So that's about 1 tablespoon here. And the first thing that we're gonna cook is the onion. So again, I have clean hands, wash my hands every time before I start cooking, so should you. So we're gonna add this in. And we're gonna saute these onions. Okay? So how do we know when the onions are done? We know the onions are done cooking when they're translucent or a little bit clear. So that's what we're gonna look for. And that's gonna take 2 to 3 minutes, okay? So watch for that in your pot. And our lentils are boiling, so I'm gonna turn it down to a simmer and put the lid back on. We'll come back to that in 20 minutes. All right. Now, the recipe calls for fresh garlic. I don't have any fresh garlic, so I'm going to use some garlic powder. And when it comes to cooking at home, use what's convenient for you. So if there's jar garlic that you have, there's squeeze tube garlic, use that too. So we'll season our onions with some garlic powder. One thing that I see a lot when I'm cooking with kids is they constantly want to stir, which is great, and they want to be involved. And stirring is a great job for little guys. But the vegetables do need to be on the pan and on the cooking surface for them to cook. So every 30 seconds, every minute is a good clue or a good cue for your kids to start stirring the pot. All right, so the next vegetables that we're gonna add are sturdy vegetables because these are gonna take a little bit longer to cook. So our sturdy vegetables are carrots and green beans. So in they go. And then also the bell pepper that we cooked, so I'm gonna get that in there. Now this is more vegetables than the recipe calls for. I'm gonna be cooking for a lot of friends. They're gonna be enjoying my stew with me. So I'm adding more than the recipe calls for. So those are in. We're gonna give them a good stir. Now this is gonna take 5 to 7 minutes to cook everything, get nice and soft. Again, I might stir about every minute or two. This is also a great time to add your other seasoning. So I'm going to add some pepper. The recipe suggests about a 1/4 teaspoon of each seasoning. My hunch is that it's gonna need a little bit more, but the great thing about cooking is that you can try as you go along. So we're gonna start with a 1/4 teaspoon, just like the recipe recommends, and then we'll come back and taste a little later and see if it needs more. So I'm gonna do a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, a 1/4 teaspoon of rosemary, and then a 1/4 teaspoon of ground thyme. Now just a little hint about thyme is if you're getting ground thyme, it's going to be a lot stronger than if you buy like dry thyme leaves. So just watch that, be careful for that. Again, I think 1/4 teaspoon will be totally fine. All right, we'll be back in 5 to 7 minutes. All right, so our sturdy vegetables, they're nice and tender now. So we're gonna go ahead and add the last of our vegetables. So again, some zucchini and some kale that's all chopped up. Get that all in the pot. We are gonna cook this for 2 to 3 minutes and get that nice and sauteed. And then we're gonna add our broth and let everything simmer for about a half hour. Now again, don't forget about your lentils. Remember, we're cooking those for about 20 minutes. We'll test them, see if they're tender enough, and we can always add those back in once they're ready. All right, see you in a couple minutes. Okay, our vegetables had about 2 to 3 minutes to saute. Give them another stir. And now it's time to add the chicken broth. So chicken broth is what I'm choosing. I have 4 cups right here. That'll go in. Honestly, in this pan, because I've added so many vegetables, it looks like it needs some more broth. You could add more broth or water. So I'll do that. But I wanted to talk about why I chose, one, not to add any salt to this recipe. So in the book, it recommends adding some salt, but there's some salt in the chicken broth anyway, so it just doesn't need any more. I can always taste my soup and see if it needs anything else and add later. So I'd rather you do it that way. I also want to talk about why we chose to add some lentils and nothing else, right? So we have tons and tons of vegetables in here. I think it will taste delicious. Maybe this will be an opportunity for you to try a new vegetable at home. So if we look at the My Plate, which is a great way to visualize the recommendations of how much food we're supposed to get at each meal, you can see we got our vegetables taken care of here. With our lentils, by adding those in, we'll get a little bit of protein. And then I was thinking, should I add some rice into this soup? Should I add some noodles? And I chose not to because I like to enjoy my soup with some crackers or a slice of bread. So when I serve my soup, which you'll see in a little bit, I'll serve it with some crackers, and that will count as my grain. So at any given meal, I recommend at least 3 food groups, and so we'll get 3 food groups covered right there. All right, so I'm gonna let all of this simmer and cook for a little bit. Once our lentils are done, I'll add them in, and then I will see you when it's time to plate up. All right, everybody, we are back. So my soup has been simmering for about 30 minutes. So I want to go over kind of the final steps that I did. One was after about 20 minutes of the lentils simmering, I tried them out. So I took a spoon, blew on it to cool it down a little bit, and tested to see if it was tender. So those lentils, we're looking for those to be about just tender, not too mushy, and they were perfect. So I added them straight to the stew. The stew, I ended up adding about 4 cups of water, more water, and I think the reason for that is only because I just added so many more vegetables in the beginning than what the recipe calls for. But again, I'm making a big batch. So if you can see, this is what our stew looks like. Very hearty, and I'm serving it with some saltine crackers here. So again, we got our veggies, we got our grain, and we got our protein. I did add another 1/4 teaspoon of rosemary and thyme, which seems to be perfect. So try this recipe at home. Use whatever vegetables you have, maybe in your own garden or whatever your favorites might be at the store. Maybe try a new one, and let us know how it is. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.